love you.
Yeah, not so much. Welcome back, Wackadoo Racing Channel. We're in the garage again. Now, although we did have a little bit of a diversion last week while we were getting the Cadillac 472 fired up. We do have a lot that still needs to happen to the Opel, and we're back on track today with newfound gusto. Because now that we heard that thing run, we gotta get this thing running. So Cody is currently working on putting oil feed lines on the motor while it's out of the car, which is one of the last things that we need to take care of while the motor is out of the car. Other than that, I think realistically the main goal this week is to try and get that motor back into the car. I see that as perfectly doable. We're going to see if we can't work out some of those things with the oil feed lines. It looks like we're missing a couple things from the kit, and there's always complications. But I'm aiming to get that motor back in this car, because there's still a lot of other things to do. Let's show you what we did with the valve cover. So one of those projects we got around to at the end of the week last week was we promised we would come up with a solution for holding down the top of our valve cover. And there we go. So now that thing's threaded, goes down to a bracket inside, and that'll hold our faux valve cover to the top of our real valve cover so that it looks nice and trick when it goes all back together. As you can see, our checklist is getting exponentially shorter. Valve cover and seal, we have a brand new one that needs to go in. Header gaskets need to be put on, but that's not going to happen until everything's actually mocked up and mounted. Water neck, I think we're still waiting on the gasket there, yeah?
Yep.
The turbo feed, we're doing that. Fluids, I mean, that's the last thing. Wiring harness is actually looking really good. He got a lot of that done last week. Still need to order the drive shaft. We're not in a big rush for that. Car can run without it. Pedals. We're going to button some of that up. We need to do something with the throttle. Clutch seems to be okay. We'll know when the motor's in the car, and we can actually pump up the clutch and see what it feels like. We need to get a shifter. Still haven't figured that out.
Have figured that out. I have a local yokel that I'm going to get in touch with. He has multiple, and we're getting it this week.
He's got a throttle cable on order, and then it's all the regular stuff. So looking pretty good. We're actually making headway. So I think the next thing to do is button up these oil lines like we're talking about, start getting an eye on whether or not this thing's going in tonight. All right, so we're at the most stressful part of the process. We have to actually tap in the oil drain line. Now, the oil drain line needs to be massively oversized compared to the pressure line that goes into the feed. So your feed is under pressure, and then everything after that is gravity fed. So it needs to be down below the turbo, a sizable amount of distance, and needs to be as big as possible so that there's no chance of backing up pressure into the turbo. So one of the ways that we can do that is way down here in this panel at the front of the pan. There's no baffling in the windage tray across the bottom, so we're going to go ahead and drill and tap right here. If there was an easy time to go ahead and do this where we were going to be taking the pan off, drill it, and then weld something in, this would be the best time because we already have the motor out. However, this motor doesn't leak, we don't want it to leak, and we don't have access to another oil pan gasket for who knows how long. We would have to order it in, and we kind of want to keep moving. So one of the ways you can get away with it is we're going to be drilling and tapping. We've got our drill bit and our tap loaded with grease to try and catch as much as we can. We're also going to be running the shop vac as well to try and catch any little pieces of aluminum that are coming off of the pan as we drill. And then once we finish getting everything as cleaned up as possible, trying to keep as minimal amount of debris going into the pan, we're going to be hooking up a line and then pouring oil down that hole and back out the drain hole to try and flush out anything that's left. And then anything that still might be in there, it's the job of the oil filter to go ahead and pick up. So it's pretty common practice for applications where they're doing it in car. It worked on my car just fine as well. It's not optimal, but it's as close as you can get without actually having to pull the pan. So let's do it. All right, I think we're good. There she is.
So that's that, guys. We're gonna close it out for tonight. We'll get back at it tomorrow. It's getting late. We'll get the motor actually thrown in tomorrow. I've got some odds and ends and material I gotta pick up for this that I've had on order. Throttle cable and some gaskets. Other than that, I think it went well. We lost a little bit of time going back and forth from the hardware store, trying to get the right piece to make this thing work, but either way, it's done right. That's in place and it's ready for the next step, which is motor in there. So, catch you guys tomorrow.
All right, guys. It's Thursday night, and we're going to pick up exactly where we left off last night. Motor's prepped, ready to go in. Cody was able to get the hose that we need to go ahead and hook up the turbo drain line, and that's pretty much the only thing that we're waiting on. Other than that, it should just be reinstallation, which is probably going to be cakewalk. No problems at all.
Yeah, none. We've done it enough already.
Been there, done that.
So we're going to throw it back in. Let's do it. As you can see, the motor is back in the engine bay. Woohoo! So there is still plenty to be done, but the rest is reinstallation. So looks like we got plenty of room. We'll go over all that a little bit later when we have a little bit more lighting and we start getting some stuff back in place. But we're going to start by throwing the valve cover back on, so we don't have to worry about anything getting into there. And then we're going to make a gasket for the water inlet because they just shipped it today. He ordered it a week and a half ago? 2 weeks ago. 2 weeks ago, and they just shipped it today. We're going to make it tomorrow so we can move on because that's going to be hard to get to later.
Unimpressed with Atkins rotary shipping times.
What he said. I mean, we're going to start plugging things in. That's pretty much it. Put things back on. All right, guys. The motor's back in. The valve cover is on and tacking up. Already been torqued down. It should be sealed. And we managed to get the whole harness together for the motor actually plugged in. So we're waiting on one or two more things that need to be plugged in once we actually can route everything, but I mean, she's home. What do you think, Cody?
She's home.
That's that, guys. With the paint and everything and a little bit of polish on there, it looks really nice. Lots of shiny plumbing that needs to go back on, polishing all the turbo piping and all that stuff. Lots of tedious stuff still left to do, but like I said, it's downhill now. It's Saturday. We're going to try and fire this thing up today. We still have a lot of button-up work that needs to be done, but we actually got a bunch going last night. We already got our oil feed line, our oil return line. We're going to hook up our water lines. Started making the gasket for the water inlet. Exhaust is back on. Almost all the harness is hooked up for the engine. So, I mean, it's mostly button-up work.
Putting up work.
But we might be able to try and fire it up today. In spite of the fact that we could have screwed it up by being really excited to start the car and then starting to put everything together, we could have given ourselves more work in the long run. So order of operations is always really important, especially with something like this. So let me show you what I'm talking about. We only had one exhaust manifold gasket, and they are not easy to get our hands on right now. We've been waiting on the other one for what, 2, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that?
It's been 2 weeks and it's supposed to show up Monday.
So had we thrown that on, and then thrown the one gasket we have for a T4 flange for the turbo on it so we could fire it and hear it, we would have dusted that gasket and the turbo gasket because it would all have to come back off again so that we could put the hood hinge back on, make sure that the hood lines up, so that we can put the hood on, so we can make sure that's good, so that when we skin that hood and put it inside of that one, we can cut the hole for the turbo to stick out and get it right the first time.
Yeah.
So we have to have the hood on and straight again because we messed with all this. So we have to have that on and straight before we put this on. Otherwise, we're going to have to do it all twice.
Well,
so
the good news
kind of a back step to move forward.
The good news is, though, all of that stuff we know fits. We know how it bolts in. And even though the exhaust manifold, because we did those super short cuts to the actual manifold plate, there's one or two nuts that are kind of a pain, but the rest of it will fly. Because we know how it all bolts up. We have all the hardware for it. Everything slips into place. We know that fits. The hood hinge has always been a problem on this car. So I think now we've got a good idea. We've got it right. And I think it's still going to work. I mean, we had this mocked up originally with the radiator where it was, but we've had the hood hinge off since then. So now that we're actually assembling this thing, it's time to get it all put back together the right way.
One of the other issues there is there's bolts that come in from the side that hold 2 brackets that are held together with bolts that then hold up the hood hinge, which is bolted with 2 more bolts. So you've got all these positions that can move and change, especially over the course of 50 years. So we've managed to lock some of those down by removing the bolts and welding them in place where they need to be, and switching to a bigger hardware with tighter tolerances. So the hood should line up better than it ever has before, because previously it was really floppy and kind of fell down every time we opened the hood. So this should be a lot better when it's done, but we're losing some important hours here where we thought we were going to run it right now. This has to happen. We didn't want to, but it's got to be done. Well, that was a pain in the ass. Show them what we got, Cody.
Well, it opens better than it ever has. So
before we would open it, and then it would fall down and go ka-chunk, and then it was a whole thing.
Passenger side would actually fall down, and it would stay proud. So I never had to actually use the hold up for it, the arm for it. So
put it back down.
It's
boom. We're gonna skip right to the part where that's off. We get back on this.
Yeah. Once we take this off, all this red's got to go away still. So, you know, even though we're only going to use the skeleton from the underside on this, it's all still got to be back to yellow because it's going onto that, and I hate this red with a passion.
Several hours have gone by so far, and we're edging closer and closer to being able to try and fire this thing. So we're going to actually start adding fluids back into it now. But while we had the opportunity and everything was kind of mocked into place, we decided to start templating how we're going to cut out the hood. We're just using beer boxes, cut out, try and get the general shape. We'll make some reference points as to where we're supposed to measure from, so we can mark that out on the hood. So we'll mark that out. That way, since we're already here, it's an easy time to do it. There's nothing in the way. We also need to put an O2 sensor in the exhaust for the downstream. Then we can go ahead and throw a battery in the back, throw fuel in the tank, basically
oil
do
in the system,
a once over for fluids, and check the wiring, make sure everything's there, and then hit the key and see what happens.
Turn key, see happens.
So Cody is hooking up the battery, and we're gonna try and cycle the key on and see what we get. We're hoping for at least a fuel prime with no leaks, if not an opening ceremony on the gauges. We've got our charge pipe disconnected. We don't want to run boost right now, but everything else is hooked up with water lines and feed lines to the turbo hooked up. We just don't want to make boost yet because we're not on the oversized injector or the ECU. So for now, we're gonna wait for him to kick that thing on and see what happens.
That ain't gonna do nothing if we don't have chassis ground. All right.
One of them. You've actually got several that are missing.
Nothing. No dice.
That's exciting.
Cool.
Chassis ground that's probably underrated was the thing we needed to do. So we threw a self-tapper through it in the chassis, and we got lights. So we're gonna see if it does something. Boy. Oh, okay. So we definitely got a click from the fuel side. It primed. We're gonna be observers and try it.
You want to hit the throttle a couple times? Shouldn't need it.
But anything, but worth a shot. While you do this. So on the Miata chassis, there are 2 big white plugs that go together somewhere in this area. Boop, boop, boop. And we lost that big green pin that holds them together, and that seems to have been the issue. Shot a little bit of ether down there, and it did try to fire. So he's going to zippy tie that. Hopefully we get fuel pump sounds, and we'll try it again. Oh, do it again.
Fuel pump's kicking. I can hear it.
Hopeful theory was that he was out of fuel. We put another 3 gallons in it, so hopefully that's what it needed. lot of this crap. There's a lot more stuff in the air than it looks like. But for now, we're gonna stop recording and just keep taking care of what's going on. Hey, Bill! So there's actually start number 2. We shut it off, make sure everything's still would start back up. She started back up. Got a couple of fans on it right now. We haven't wired the fan to a relay, but she's running. Now, you're hearing that idle surge where she's trying to find idle because we don't have a downstream O2. That's why she's surging, but she does run. Oh, you hear that little whistle? Yeah, I heard it that time. Woo! Guys, we have a running car. We fired it up multiple times, put it through a bunch of heat cycling, and everything works. It's not even leaking anything. So, I mean, we're calling it a night. It's about 10:30. We're gonna smoke cigars, have a few beers, and just rejoice in the fact that we have a running car. Cody, what do you think?
Pretty stoked. You know, there's not a lot's been said about it. There's been a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of hands going into this. And you guys see us mostly working on it, but this is a huge effort on a lot of people's parts. So it was big. It's big. I don't believe it, even though I've started it and heard my blow off valve and heard flutter and heard my exhaust and seen no leaks.
What do we got there? Boom! She's look at this. We just
Just that aside.
we already did this. We did that whole thing.
Yep.
We did this. That's gone.
That's good.
Got that. That's the list to make it so we can drive it.
And
You guys see everything about 20 minutes at a time. We're at this every night for 4 hours at a time, and we've been at it for 2 months straight now, pretty much every single night. So it seems like a small accomplishment until you realize that we put a lot of time and effort into this, and this is a huge moment for us. This is friggin' huge. So this is exciting. So we're gonna call it a night. We're gonna hit it again on Monday, start tucking some things away. We're still dealing with that downstream O2 sensor and some other stuff, but who cares about all that? We're done for the night.
it runs. We're done. It runs. Cigar time.
We did a thing. So we templated out our cut and we cut the stock hood. And it looks ridiculous. So still a lot of cleanup to do here. But it looks a lot like a Hot Wheels.
It looks a lot like a Hot Wheels. Yeah.
I don't think either of us are mad about it.
Not even a little bit. No.
Starting to go a little bit late Monday night. We've gotten a lot done, so I think we're going to do one last thing. We found a couple of vacuum leaks and a couple of all of our grounds to get the car running were very temporarily mocked in. We literally just threw a couple of self-tappers through them or stuck them in the nearest bolt to get them there. So we went back and nut-certed all the grounding lugs we could find. We did find a couple of vacuum leaks. We still have a couple of things that we haven't gotten plugged in, but we know it'll run, and it's running better every time. So we're gonna go ahead and fire it up. He's wiring the big Mishimoto fan to the original relay, so we already checked, and our concern was that a lot of times with a fan upgrade, the relay or the fuse isn't big enough to support the larger fan, but this Mishimoto is actually a smaller amperage fan than the factory one, so it should run it just fine. So we're gonna hook everything up, we're gonna temperature cycle the whole thing. As long as the fan kicks on, we know that's good. That's one more thing we can check off the list of concerns. And we'll see if we can get that fan going. And the fan was only kicking on for about 30-second intervals. We think the battery's pretty depleted. It's got just enough to start the car, but it's probably not putting quite back as much as we lost by having it sitting on the ground for as long as we did. So we're gonna charge the battery up a little bit. Hopefully that gets rid of the little bit of surge that we were having from the fan kicking on, because it doesn't draw any more than normal.
And we're still missing an O2 sensor,
Yeah,
so
the
getting
second
O2 will
sensor
help.
is an issue. So,
Yeah.
so it's not being able to actually refer to its downstream because there isn't one right now. It's just unplugged. So it's dumping a bunch of extra fuel and kind of idle hunting. Plugging in that vacuum line was a huge help. But I mean, it's running pretty good.
It's running pretty good. To make sure they were...
Do the thing real quick.
The thing?
Yeah.
I mean, it's...
Yeah. See if it'll do the thing for us.
Didn't do that before. I guess still got a little bit of a hard start, but that's kind of expected with a couple things we're still missing.
But I think that's about it. We have running car. There's still lots of stuff to do. If you guys have already sat through this much video or have been checking out the rest of our videos, please consider subscribing because the best is yet to come. We still have a lot of stuff that we need to deal with before we're able to actually go hit the dyno, and there's a lot of button-up work that's going to be entailed. However, we are going to go hit the dyno, do some street driving, see what it does, and then go figure out how much power it actually makes. But for tonight, I think that's it. Well, I gotta do out.